Hi. Hi. Sorry, the stream this evening, YouTube have changed something on the live streaming. And so I had to manually reset the whole thing, even though I put out a reminder that I was coming on. So anyway, I had to reset it all because it just didn't work the way it usually does. Anyway, these things happen in YouTube. Welcome. Here I am, Amanda, here in Italy. And tonight we're going to talk about the number one country that European country that Americans are moving to. Can you guess what it is? So I've been doing quite a lot of content in the last 2 years about moving to Europe, mostly people requesting information on moving to Italy, what the ins and outs are, how it works, blah, blah, blah. And so there's lots of those videos, and I will put up the playlist over there, and you can go watch them. And maybe if you've watched them in the past, refresh, because there's some new legislation that's come out in most European countries in the last year or two. But what is the country that attracts the most the most expats? We're focusing on Americans this evening because Americans constitute the largest group of people wanting to move into Europe. So about 140,000, if we're to believe the figures as accurate, Americans have moved to France. If you guessed Italy, you're wrong. The number is much less in Italy. And in fact, up until about 20 years ago, Italy was so homogenous. It was just, there were very, very few foreigners. When I first came to Italy, I could count on my hand the people that I met across Italy, not only Americans, but just foreigners in general. And it's still, it's about 7% of the total population. But France is a much bigger country, obviously. And for some reason, it attracts people and is still attracting a lot of people to go and live there in 2025. So let's look at it. Why France? Why France? And I have done some other videos about moving to France, and I will put them down in a playlist, a France playlist down for you in the description box, so you can go and look at that. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Amanda. I vlog on living in Europe, living in Italy particularly, but also cover France a lot because I spent some time in France. And yeah, so welcome. And you should really go and right now. You can go and like that like button. And I hope you're going to enjoy what we have to talk about this evening. And if you've been thinking about going to France, either to visit or to live, then stick around because I've got lots of very good information for you. I'm also going to give you some of my favorite vlogs of people who've moved to France, and their vlogs could possibly help you and give you different information than I'm giving you, or just maybe give you some more details or some anecdotes of how they're enjoying living in France. I particularly like Richard and Maria Hall, A New Life in France. I'll link their video down in the description box, their latest one. And surprisingly, I just saw as I was preparing to come online that they're talking about Americans in France for a change, because they quite often cover Brits in France. But yeah, so I'll link that down there because I particularly like the way they present their moving to France. A New Life in France, it's called. Okay, so why France? Okay, so in a list of international countries, Internations.org study, expats ranked France, this is in the whole world, 6th for healthcare. I think it usually comes up number 1 in Europe. 14th for quality of life. 15th for environment and climate. 15th for leisure options. Overall, 75% of expats, these are the notes I've made. I've done lots of research, and I'm giving you these notes. Overall, 75% of expats say they are happy living in France compared to 72% globally. Number one, France is the world's most popular tourist destination. Now, I've known this for ages. I mean, everybody's dreaming of going to Paris. There's so many movies about Paris. It's incredible how many people long to go and actually live in Paris. I have no desire to live in Paris, in a big city, but the French countryside has always drawn me, and I do love it. And so we'll cover some more of this as we go along. So its gastronomy is a UNESCO intangible cultural world heritage. How can you beat French gastronomy? I can hear Italians screaming as I speak. It has the most Nobel Prize winners for literature. It has Europe's highest mountain, and three major mountain ranges are located in France. So the big Alps, like the barrier that is the border with Italy and Switzerland, these are all huge mountains. And the beautiful Mont Blanc, of course. You can travel very easily throughout Europe on a very good rail network. It's the longest in the continent, and it's just, there's just everything. You can get to every little town and village, and if you can't do it on a train, you can certainly do it on a coach. So that's good. It's very accessible. And if you're in Europe in one country, let's say you're in Italy or in Austria or whatever, it's very difficult, very easy and not difficult because it's borderless, to go from one to another very easily via a bus, a train, a boat in some cases, because you just can. It's very well networked. And of course, if you're European Union, you don't need a passport, obviously. But we're talking about Americans, and they do need a passport, and certainly a 3-month holiday stay or a longer visa. But we'll cover visas later on. So it's got everything. So you can enjoy beautiful beaches. It's got the lovely coasts. It's got the Mediterranean, which is so famous. It's got places like Monte Carlo and Nice and Cannes, which has the film festival. So we've all been subjected to this dream of the Côte d'Azur and this beautiful Mediterranean blue sea, which is very warm and actually hot. And so when people dream about coming to France and then land up in Paris, as many of my friends have, they then are surprised that the weather's decidedly cold and that perhaps they were dreaming more of the sun in the south of France, but then they realize that they don't like the heat. So it's a very difficult thing to find the right climate in France. So we're going to cover that. Okay. So let's say you're ready to go. Yeah, you've got France. France is on your list. You're ready to go to France. What are the things you need to know, and how do you avoid the pitfalls, the problems that could come up? Sorry, I'm a bit disjointed here because I set everything up for the chat. And then I had to redo it all. When you come into the chat, won't you just drop down and let us know which city you're joining from? And if you watch this back later, you can also just comment which city, and maybe, if you have some questions or some advice to offer, great. Okay, first problem, your visit. Do you need a visa? How long are you coming for? If you're coming for the States, you can have, the normal 3-month visit. Let's cover it. And do you have enough money to come for 3 months to stay in holiday accommodation? All this sort of stuff. So do you need a visa to live in France? Well, yes. If you're living beyond the 3-month holiday. The French government website is incredibly well organized. It's in English. People panic too much about this. People ask their friends. People ask people they shouldn't be asking. It's all on the French government website. It's written in English. You can find out whether you're going to stay in a short period, whether you want to come in on a student visa, whether you want to come in on a long stay visa, whether you want to come in on what they call the inactive visa, which is a retirement visa where you cannot work, whether you want to invest in France and set up to run your business in France. All of this is possible, okay? But you need the right visa, and you possibly need someone to help you with that visa, would be my suggestion. Okay. And then if you have some links to French ancestry, in other words, you are married to a French person, or you, via one of your parents, you have French citizenship possibility, that's a whole nother kettle of fish. We won't cover that tonight, but there are those people too. Okay. So anyone who's European Union or EEA doesn't need any kind of visa to visit France, obviously, and they can stay in France simply by registering. Now, everybody has to register and get the carte de séjour. That is just normal. It's normal in Italy. It's normal in most European countries. Even though you have a right to live there without a visa, you still have to register as a resident, and you've got to do all the bits and pieces that come with that. For example, how to eventually be able to use the French health system, all of that stuff. Okay, this is not a post about the ABCD list of what you have to do. I have other videos like that, and I can link you to other information. It's simply about why France? Why are so many Americans thinking about France? Okay, right. So all new residents in France, regardless of where they're coming from, if they're not European Union, have to actually register and have all their ducks in a row and their paper done. Okay, but you can also ask the French consulate in the country in which you're resident, America, or the city in which you're resident. So not knowing where to settle in France, this is a big issue, which I just touched on. People spend a lot of energy on this, and I know in my Facebook groups, people are always discussing this. I would like to not be in a place that's very remote, obviously. I want to be in a place that has the perfect climate, obviously. But, one person's perfect climate is another person's hell on earth. So it's very difficult to know where is this perfect place going to be, where the climate is just to your taste and everything's just as you want it to be. This is a very difficult balance to strike, by the way. But anyway, people want to do it. So just suffice to say, there's the southeast of France where I spend most of my time. That borders on Switzerland and Italy. That has mountains, it has skiing, and it has also countryside and more, flat plains with farmland and stuff when you get away from the pre-Alps. And that has a mixture of weather, perhaps a bit of winter. But as you go further north towards Paris, where everyone wants to be, well, many people want to be, let's put it that way, the weather is decidedly grey and rainy and might not be what you wanted when you decided to leave UK, for example, because it was grey and cloudy, or leave the Netherlands, which is grey and cloudy, and the low sky, and you wanted that beautiful blue Mediterranean sky and sun and all the lovely stuff. That is more the southwest of France, and the south of France along the Mediterranean, along the coasts. And if you go further up north again to Normandy, even though it's on the coast, it's pretty rainy and grey a lot of the time. So you really need to do your homework and find out what part of France you really want to be for your perfect climate. And maybe you will find yourself in an area in which it's just too hot for you. Even though you loved it for 6 months, it just becomes way too hot in the very long summer. Okay. So should you live in a city or the countryside? Here's another big decision. A lot of people, if they are beyond their children being in school and their children are already off their hands and they're coming, to start a new life, in their 60s or so, they possibly don't have to consider schooling, and they just have to consider finding a nice community they want to be. Now, being in a city has its benefits, of course. You have lots of things happening, lots of exciting events to go to, but finding accommodation, suitable accommodation, can be a real challenge. And if it's in one of the major cities like, Paris, Lyon, I mean, one of the big cities, perhaps you are going to really struggle to find the accommodation that you perceive to be suitable, and to find a French owner or a French realtor to actually rent to you as a foreigner. This is one of the biggest headaches that most foreigners find in France. Okay. So should you choose the countryside or the city? That's really up to you. France is very well serviced in terms of services, healthcare services, whether you live countryside or in a city. So that shouldn't really affect your decision. But, it's really up to you where you want to live. France really has, tiny villages that are absolutely gorgeous, which would be my preference. And perhaps they're 30 minutes away from a bigger town or a city, and that would be suitable for you. That you just need to be near a city. You don't want to be in a city. So there we are. Anyway, only you can decide. Okay, if you're going with your family, then that's a whole different thing. You need to hook up with people who can help you how to deal with schooling, and that's going to be a lot more complex. But suffice to say, you'll be zoned for a certain area, unless you're doing private education, which is really incredibly expensive. You will be zoned in an area in which you live in that city. So that's that. Okay. So one of the biggest concerns most people have that they voice to me is, I want to be in an area where there are lots of expats because I want to, plug into a network. So networking is very, very challenging. And the amount of people who actually come to live in France who have fluent French is quite small, quite a small percentage. There are people, of course, who are married to French people, so they've got the language. But, we all need to network. When I first came to Italy, I needed to network. And I would say it took me about 2 years to start speaking Italian with enough fluidity that I could, communicate with people and socialize with people. And now, 22 years on, it would frighten me terribly if I suddenly couldn't speak Italian to network with, and I only had to rely on English, my home language. So people underestimate the importance of this. They say, well, I go to France on holiday, I can order a croissant and all of that. Sure, but if you're going to network, and you're going to need to network, and networking doesn't only involve getting a job. Networking can be, how to find a good realtor, how to find a good area for a house, how to sort out your utilities bill when you don't understand, how to find a good school, how to find a good language school to go and study French. Integrating into your community, this is people's biggest concern. And you need French. And recently, the French government have made a decision on the long-term visa that you will need to have French as a requirement. You will need to pass an exam. And if you continue to ask for permanent residence in France, you will need at least a B1 of French level. And that will be instituted this summer, 2025. So that is something that you just can't avoid. That is something that you need to start planning for before you even decide to move to France. You need to study French and find every opportunity you can to speak it. Wherever you are now, plug into the Alliance Française, which is all over the world, and get some French and keep going at it, and don't give up. And it's tough and it is complicated. Now, I know some people say over a certain age, you don't need it for the inactive visa. Okay, that's fine. you don't need it to get your inactive retirement visa, but you're going to need it to live in France, trust me, because there are so many things that you need to do on a daily basis that you just can't avoid. So either somebody else has to do it for you, or you may be in the fortunate position where you own a house and so you don't have to go looking for a realtor. And yeah, but there's just so many things that are going to be a headache for you, opening a bank account, all of those sort of things, if you don't have French. So I implore you, just the same as I do for anybody moving to Europe, and I do the same for all of those that I advise moving to Italy. Please get the language. Please start learning it before you even get here. Super. Okay. That's how you integrate. And yes, you will have a much bigger chance of integrating if you can speak French. And I know that everybody asks, which is the city with the biggest expat community? Which is the city with the largest amount of Americans? This is going to help you much. It's going to be nice to occasionally say hi to an American, but it isn't going to help you integrate. Drop down in the chat box if you want to make a suggestion or ask a question. So not learning French is a big headache. I personally, I don't know how anyone can contemplate actually moving to France without having French, but that's me. And don't give up. I mean, don't give up. Maybe your first try doesn't go well. Just keep going. Just keep going. So make a checklist. Make a checklist from the minute you first have this brilliant idea that you went on holiday to France, you fell in love with. I know that feeling so well. Start making a checklist of what are the possibilities, what do you need to do to make this reality and take it out of your head and heart and really into, a reality. So applying for a French long stay visa, as I mentioned, it's all on the Italian government website. And then in your country of residence, there's a VLSTS people who handle all these visas, and you would apply to them, and they will give you a list of the requirements. One of the biggest headaches that I have seen with people I've helped, friends I have moved to France, and channels that I've watched in the past on moving to France is finding accommodation in France. It's really, really difficult. First of all, there's a general shortage of accommodation, affordable accommodation, apart from Airbnb. I mean, obviously you can stay in an Airbnb for 3 months, but that's going to be challenging and very expensive. And eventually you're going to need to actually not pay for an Airbnb and get your own place. So trying to get a contract from a French owner, this is going to be a real challenge. And it's without doubt one of the biggest headaches that everybody talks about in terms of moving. Okay. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's a major challenge. And that's why I seriously suggest you have a hand holder, someone who's au fait with what goes on in France, knows what goes on in France, so that you can actually plug into them and say, what chance, can you read this contract? Is this contract actually, should it be signed by me, or is it just completely a non-starter? Things like opening a bank account, you're going to have to go into a bank. They're not going to just sit and talk English to you. You might be lucky. It might be a big international bank in a big city, but the chances are they're going to expect you to at least, greet them in French and say a few things. I mean, you're going to be running a French bank account, and maybe in the beginning you can transfer money up and down, but eventually you need a French bank account. You're going to have to pay your bills. You're going to have to pay your utilities. You're going to have to do all of this. And by the way, this applies to whichever country you're moving to in Europe, whether it's Italy, Germany, whatever. Okay. So, and of course, with this goes getting a local tax number and dealing with your tax and all of that. So we come to why France, and one of the biggest reasons that I have seen over the past few years is that France does not tax your social security, which is a big factor in deciding for many Americans. So when you're going to retire on your social security on an inactive visa, which means you can't work, by the way. And by the way, not working also includes online. So if you think you're going to get away with just continue your business in America online in the States, remember that any work you do in Europe, you will be taxed on your worldwide income. So don't make the mistake of thinking you could just work in France, even though you've told them that you're retiring and you're not working, and not pay any tax, because you run the risk of being found out. And that's not a good situation to be in. So anyway, so one of the biggest reasons, as I said, was France doesn't tax Social Security that you get from the States. Another big factor is that unlike Italy, where you within 1 year as American have to rewrite your driver's license, in Italian, there's no ability to do it in English. And this is a major negative, because people do want to keep their driver's license and have a driver's license. This is a big headache in Italy because it has to be done in Italian. In France, for many states, not all states in the States, but quite a few, you can actually convert into a French driver's license. So that's a big plus. The major plus is the tax situation in France is more favorable than, for example, Italy, where you're taxed on your worldwide income regardless. The only exception in Italy is if you have a government social security. In other words, you were a federal employee, you worked for the government, you were a civil servant, as we call it in England. That's the exception. But for the rest, you taxed on your worldwide income, and you will be taxed on your social security. Okay. So registering with the French health thing can be another plus for many Americans, because for those not super privileged in the States, perhaps they don't feel sufficiently covered in the States for an emergency, and they feel that they could be bankrupted by, something going wrong and needing health care. Well, France has one of the, if not the top healthcare system in Europe. Certainly it's right near the top, and you should have no concern. Once you have your carte séjour, once you've registered and everything's all lined up, you can then apply. You obviously, when you first come in on your long stay visa, you have you purchase your year's insurance in advance, so you're covered for all eventualities. But once you are able to be a permanent resident in France, you can obviously plug into the local system. This can happen. So, and again, every single thing that you need, you don't need to panic, is online on the government site. So it's called the Protection Universelle Maladie. Okay. Okay. Driver's license we covered. So I'm leaning this towards America, but UK people would have a similar situation. Maybe the driver's license will be slightly different, but because Americans by far outnumber everyone else in terms of amount of numbers. Okay, so knowing what to pack when you're coming to France. Okay, so if you're coming on a look-see trip, and you don't have anywhere to leave luggage, in other words, you don't own your own house. If you own your own house, great. You can go take 5 suitcases and leave them there every time you come back and forth, and that would be great. But if you're coming on a look-see and you want to be flexible and you want to move around and you're using public transport or whatever, don't take huge suitcases. It's a nightmare. Because whether you land in Paris, and you probably will land at Charles de Gaulle is enormous. It's huge. One of my, I remember when I was in Portugal, I used to use Air France to fly back and forth. And my goodness, I walked, I don't know, I covered my 10,000 steps every time I flew out of Charles de Gaulle. I would probably cover like 20,000 steps. It's a huge airport, and you're going to hold it and you're going to have to take it off one, and you might not even find a trolley. And even if you found a trolley, then you're going through barriers where you can't use the trolley upstairs, downstairs. Maybe you can't find a lift. Lifts are few and far between in Europe, and they're quite small. This is not America where you have huge lifts. So leave the big suitcase at home, unless you're on the poverty line, which I'm assuming you won't if you're coming to move to France. You can buy some clothes here, really. Okay. You're not going to compete with the fashion models in Paris. If that's what you're hoping to do, look as beautiful as well, then I don't know, you will spend a lot of time trying to haul big suitcases up and down stairs, which is a nightmare. And getting into the metro is going to be impossible for you. And it's lovely if you're a 20-year-old girl and you're all beautiful. Maybe you can force some lovely young man to help you. But generally, no, people are busy. You're just going to be struggling with your suitcases. Bring one suitcase, maybe a backpack on your back that's not too heavy. That's not going to turn you into a hunchback because it's so heavy. Yes, and the rest you can get here, or you can just rinse out your stuff and dry it on the radiator. Do not bring a big suitcase. I don't know how many times I've said this to people and how many times they arrive with a huge suitcase, ignoring me, and then have a terrible time because they just can't get anywhere. The last time, this last Christmas, I was in France. I travel very light, but I had a little suitcase and then I had a sort of other sort of bag on a trolley. And I can't tell you how many times I had to run up and down several flights of stairs to get trains, changing platforms. And I missed 2 or 3 trains. And I just had one little piece of luggage. If I'd had 2 big ones, I would have had to haul it up 3 flights of stairs in some case to get to the overpass that passes over from one platform to another. Please do not bring, I think I've already said that, haven't I? Don't bring big luggage. Okay. So, and then, of course, once you decide that you're going to move to France, then comes the question of how do I find a removals company, all of this stuff. There are lots of French groups on Facebook. There's also Americans in France. You can find this all out. Also, if you're moving with your pets, which many people do, you can find that information out on Facebook, Americans in France, but also other channels, other Facebook channels, and also people on YouTubers who cover moving to France, cover their move to France, cover what they did to move their dog. And I'll put a list of some of my favorites down in the description box so you can find out how you're going to do this. Okay, have I enticed you? Let me know in the comments if I have, if you watch this back later. But I guess your biggest headache will be that initial visa, finding out the right visa, depending on your age and whether you plan to work in France, land a job in France. That's not going to be easy. There's a great work shortage. And of course, you would need very fluent French. And even so, it would be a challenge. But perhaps you're thinking of setting up your own company in France. Maybe you have enough money that you'd like to invest in a technology company in France, and all of that can be done. As I say, go to the French government website. I will also put that down in the description box, and you can go and find all of these questions answered, your particular question. So now I want to cover something that happens for me at least every week, and it happened this week. And sometimes it makes me think, should I actually be covering moving to Europe anymore? Because sometimes it just drives me completely crazy that people do not listen. At least they don't listen to the people that they should be listening to. They get advice from their family and friends, some of whom haven't even been to France regularly or even recently, or Italy, or Europe in general. So here's the scenario. So this very week, somebody wanted to know from me, will the Italian government require me to pay tax now? I said, I don't know. I'm not a tax specialist. I give the guidelines. And her concern was that she felt, I'll just give you some of the details. I've already discussed with this person that you can only live and listen. Everybody, listen. This is something that I say at least 20 times a week on this channel. You can only be tax resident in one country. So you can't say, oh, well, I'm going to spend 6 months there and I'm going to spend 6 months here. And no. The country in which you spend the most time, which is 6 months, so the other one has to be less than 6 months. The one that you don't want to be tax resident in. The country that you spend 6 months in, you're going to be taxable. You're going to have to prove your tax earnings, and it'll be on your worldwide income in the case of Italy and France. And so people regularly fall into this trap. So this particular person said, she said, I feel like the Italian government is stalking me. I said, really? That's odd. I haven't heard that. She said, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and somebody was stalking me, and I don't know the details of this. It sounded very odd. But the long and the short of this is that she felt like originally her plan was to move to Italy. She owns a house in the south of Italy, in Sicily. And she wanted to know from me, I've already told her this 20 times, but again, family and friends had told her different, so she listened to them. She wanted to know if she would be liable for tax. I said, well, I mean, where are you resident? Oh, she's tax resident in the States. I said, okay, well, then you're going to be taxed there. So what I'm saying to you is you need a tax specialist in international tax. Do not think that you're just going to come here and overstay your 6 months, because then you're going to be tax resident. You're going to be taxed here. You can be taxed in your country in which you spend the most time. Okay. Secondly, she said to me, the reason they know that I think they know is my residence is written in my passport. And I said to her, that's very odd. I've had a few passports in my life, and my place of residence has never been in my passport. So she looked and she said, no, you're right, it isn't. So she was just imagining that it was her place of residence. Anyway, what can I say? Don't listen to friends and family. Well, I mean, they could be giving you great advice. I don't know. I can't evaluate this. But if you look at every Ponzi scheme, every scammer there ever was, every person who sold someone some financial product that was a lie and a scam and a Ponzi scheme to steal their money, it's always in a small little networking group. It's always friends of friends, friends of family, family, friends, whatever. Some of these Italian family haven't ever left Italy. They were born in Italy. They've lived in the same town their whole lives. They know absolutely zero, double zero, about anything to do with immigration, what paperwork you need, what the tax legislation is. They know nothing. They are hopeless for you. They have nothing to offer other than, look, I know how to make a beautiful melanzana parmigiana, eggplant parmigiana. I can make a wonderful, whatever, pasta dish. That's sure, that's fine. But they're not going to be very helpful to you in terms of what you need. Are you able to purchase a house? How that process will be, because they can maybe do some translations for you. But those are not the people that you should be seeking advice for. If you're moving your assets from one country to another, you need a tax specialist. You really do. I don't know how else to say it. Said it all before. Another person that I spoke to this week was telling me that they never anticipated that when they went to France, they wouldn't be able to find accommodation. And they're in their second year. And after the second year that they've been there, they are still casting around, paying Airbnbs, and they just wish that they could find a house. I'm pretty sure if they had someone to help from the beginning, they would have found a way by now to have a guarantor or to have some way to get accommodation. So I'm simply saying, please help me. Please help me to not get so tired of repeating myself, that people actually will listen to those who have had experience of moving from one country to another, who know what it is to live in France, who know what it is to move to France as a foreigner and set up and become a permanent resident. Please, I implore you, for the sake of this channel, for the sake of me going literally insane, please do not ask people who have no clue. Okay, so what have I been doing this week? I have been doing 2 vintage markets. They were both fabulous. I drove back from the vintage market looking at the beautiful mountains, Lake Maggiore, and once again said how lucky I am to live in the most beautiful place in the world. The beautiful Alps, they've still got snow on them. The sun was shining. It was absolutely glorious. And I filmed 2 different markets for you on 2 different occasions. I just need the time to edit it, and then I'm going to put it up here so that I'm not always talking about moving, but I'm showing you some of the life I enjoy here. I have lots of videos up on the channel of what it's like in my village. I just did a video last week. I'll put up the playlist of what it costs to live here in Italy, what it costs to live in France. All of these things I try to cover, but I also try and cover some of my beautiful lifestyle, some of my beautiful life, because that's what I'd like to share with you. So there are lots of channels about living in France, moving to France. I'm going to, as I mentioned, put some downstairs in the description box. You can go and look there and do me a favor and leave me a comment. Help me solve this problem of how to get people to realize that a lot of the work they do before they even come to Italy or France or Portugal or wherever they're moving to will help them enormously once they get here. Help me to do that. What else have I been doing? It's warming up. It's getting hotter, which is lovely. I can feel winter's fingers. You know, spring is prizing the fingers of winter away from us. I started a new granny blanket. I made this one a couple of years ago. And it gets used a lot on the sofa when somebody's just watching a movie or whatever. That somebody may be me. And so I'm now making a new one that has more autumn colors. This one, my cat that I used to have watched me make it from the first square. So that was his favorite blanket. Well, he's been gone now 6 years, and it's been washed many times since then. But it's still his blanket, really. And so now I'm using more browns and oranges. I'm going to make an autumn shaded blanket. So that's fine when I have the odd moment and I'm watching. I like my hands to be busy, so I've been doing that. But it's soon going to be too warm for me to want to work with wool. But hey, that's what I've been doing. And I've been editing. So I'm going to have some amazing videos for you. So if you're joining for the first time and maybe you don't want to move to France, but you're very in love with Italy, want to move to Italy and you want to see the lifestyle, go and watch. And yeah, and don't forget to subscribe, because it helps the channel a lot if you subscribe, because it means that YouTube will, and the like button is that right there. You can go and like it right now. That like button will determine that YouTube will decide to send lots of people my video based on the fact that people liked it when they watched it. It's that simple. I make this content for you guys because you want to know what it's like to live in France, to live in Europe. And so please go and like it and subscribe if you haven't. And if you hit the bell, you'll be reminded. My subscribers quite often write to me and say, I didn't get advised you were coming online. I missed you. Well, you haven't hit the bell then. If you hit the bell, it will warn you when I'm coming online. Anyway, thank you for sticking with me this evening. As I had to reload the live as the other one didn't load. And thank you very much for watching. I appreciate every person who watches. I appreciate all my wonderful worldwide audience. And yeah, great. Thank you for all your comments. I really love your comments. They're always super useful to me. And I guess I'll see you on the next one, which will probably be about the vintage markets and shopping in Italy. And soon I'm going to do a supermarket shop. I have already filmed a lot of it, but I have to edit it because the supermarkets tend to be quite snippy about what you can and can't watch. What have I got to read down here? Lee Ann Patterson, found your channel via perfume reviews, but found this chat interesting. Oh, thank you, Lee. That's sweet of you. Yeah. Yeah, I covered France this evening because it's been on everybody's lips, and lots of the Americans are moving to France for obvious reasons. But some people just like to go on holiday in France, and I had two this last year. So I hope you enjoyed the content tonight. And let me know in the comments. Leave me a comment down there when I'm not live anymore. And if you're joining for the first time, answer this question. If you're joining for the first time, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. Okay, see you on the next one. I'm really looking forward to this week, and I hope to soon be able to edit those videos for you. See you soon. Lots of love from Amanda here in Italy. Bye. Bye.